Hello everyone, Bryan here, back again with another YouTube video for Dead by Daylight, and today we're going to be doing the classic, the Killer Tier List 2026 on the Stranger Things Part 2 chapter. I don't think I've ever done one of these specifically on this channel before, but hey, today is the day. This is probably the best time to do one of these because we've just had one of the most anticipated killer releases of all time, which is, of course, the first Stranger Things Vecna, Henry, whatever you want to call him. So, without further ado, let me get into the criteria for my tier list, because these are very important. Please keep them in mind throughout the entire video. Criteria number 1 is that, and this is the most important one, we are assuming that the survivors are quite good in this tier list. We are not going to be using any scenarios where, let's say, we're not going to treat Dungeons & Dragons Vecna as if the survivors don't know how to crouch the skeletons. Survivors will hold W extremely hard against Pyramid Heads. Survivors will be mostly able to dodge Deathslinger shots at long range. They'll know how to flare ranged killer powers. They'll be pretty good at running the nurse in certain situations. Survivors will be on comms. That is another one of my criteria. They'll have generally good map knowledge and be decent in chase, basically knowing what the killer powers do, how to counter them, and survivors will be using strong perks and trying to win. We're not going to rank anybody based on what happens if the survivors are throwing for altruism. Essentially, it's a competitive-minded tier list. You have to assume that you're facing the best on average that you will get in a public match. This isn't a competitive tournament tier list, but rather a competitive-minded, competitive-adjacent public match tier list. Criteria number 2 is that we're not going to be factoring in any add-ons that are absurdly broken to the point where they fundamentally change the killer. So that's going to be your like Singularity's denied requisition form. Not going to be considering things like, say, Wesker's lab photo, or Clown's pinky finger. Things like 3-blink nurse are not going to be considered just because they fundamentally change the killer. It's not representative of your average game. Another shout here that no longer exists would have been Myers' Tombstone, old Myers' Tombstone. So yeah, things like that not going to be considered because it's just not representative of the average way that the killer is played. So if the add-on is too much of a fundamental change, won't be factored in. So, and the last criteria is going to be maps. We're going to assume that we're on a relatively balanced map. However, if a killer is significantly worse on certain maps, they will receive a little bit of a penalty for that. So just imagine that these are taking place on, I don't know, Cold Tower, Wrecker's Yard, whatever the most balanced map in your opinion is. But if we have a killer, let's say like the Dredge, who is significantly harmed by a handful of maps, he's going to have to take that into consideration on the tier list. So, with those criteria out of the way, let's get right into it with the Trapper. Trapper, if you're still maining him after all this time, congratulations to you. You have my respect. He's going to go right there into D tier. He's just power crept at this point. He's the poster boy of the game. He's been the face of it since it came out. And as a result, the behavior has said before that they need him to be really easy to play and really easy to understand. So they don't want to add a ton of new things to him that make him super strong, because that'll, I guess, hurt the new player experience in their opinion. Now, in my opinion, what hurts the new player experience is the total lack of tutorials about any of the other killer powers, but to each their own. So Trapper, going straight into the D tier, pretty much suffering to play him unless you can get a hook in basement and then like camp the shack with Bloody Coil, which is like boring on its own. So Trapper, yeah, starting off in the D tier, I'm sure everybody expected this. Wraith, number 2. Wraith is going to go up here in the B tier. He has stood the test of time as a killer design. Very easy to learn, hard to master type of killer. There's a lot to him, actually. Takes advantage of solo queue, confusion pretty well, but can actually do pretty well against teams on Discord if you are good enough in M1 chase. He's a very chase micro heavy killer that rewards putting time into him, but at the end of the day, he is still a hit you twice with basic attack killer. so he does have a ceiling, and that is going to be the B tier. Moving right on, we have the Hillbilly. Hillbilly is going to go up here in the S- tier. So now the difference between the S and the S- tier we'll talk about later, but Hillbilly is definitely a top 5 killer in this game. Insane mobility, insane map pressure, insta-down chainsaw, ability to do all different shapes of curves, especially with his overdrive, pallet pressure, just constantly on people in chase with that mobility. Hillbilly, I mean, he's one of the strongest killers in the game. Definitely not the strongest killer in the game, but he's certainly up there. If you want to play a strong killer that doesn't necessarily give you free wins and has a really high learning curve, Hillbilly is probably your guy. All right, the Nurse goes up here in the S tier as usual. Queen of Dead by Daylight for so long. I mean, what else can be said? She ignores the rules of the game that everybody else has to play by. Pallets, windows, terrain mean nothing to her. She's only really faltering against teams that are very good at both pre-running her, breaking line of sight, and pathing strangely when she's charging her blink, and the most important thing against the Nurse, dying in corners. If the Nurse gets a relatively large map with a team that's experienced at running to the correct spot to die, she can lose very easily. So that is why she's not the strongest killer in the game, even though she is without a doubt number 2. We'll be getting there soon. So yeah, Nurse, S tier, but not number 1. Huntress is up next, and she's going to go right here in the B tier along with the Wraith. So Huntress is an interesting killer. She has a theoretically infinite skill ceiling with those hatchets, but there is a lot going against her as well these days. Map collision being a main one, and also map dependence. She's not really the greatest on indoor maps. She's such an old killer at this point that really good survivors are incredibly good at exploiting her 110% speed nature at small pallets. And she kind of suffers a lot from most of her mains being stuck on only running aura reading, which means that, yeah, they might hit some cool shots, but people are still leaving out the door in the end because they didn't bring anything to stop the gens. So Huntress, definitely a fun, pretty well-balanced killer. Debatable whether or not she's fun to go against, but yeah, not too strong, not too weak. She's going to be in the B tier. Ghostface is up next, and you'll notice that these aren't exactly perfectly in order, because they came completely scrambled. I had to kind of readjust them into chronological order the best I could. So Ghostface is going to go right in the D tier here, along with the Trapper. This killer is just another example, a victim of power creep. Yes, he can do more than the Trapper. You can make some crazy sneaky plays with this killer. He does reward kind of really good map knowledge and just like stealth gameplay. So he does have things he can do. But at the end of the day, he is a basic M1 killer with no mobility power, no chase power, and his reveal mechanic is still kind of weird on both sides. Like, you'll get revealed by people that probably shouldn't have revealed you, and you won't get revealed by people that are like standing right in front of you staring at you. So that inconsistency combined with just being a weak M1 killer lands Ghostface in the D tier. Hag is up next, and Hag is also going to find herself in the D tier here. Another victim of power creep and old design that hasn't been updated. Hag just simply cannot do anything against survivors with sprint burst and survivors who have watched a video about how to deal with her traps easily. So she can hold a 3-gen, yeah, that's fine. It's good, but as soon as she gets some survivors that know how to look at the ground and deal with her traps, wipe them away, and then abuse the fact that she is a 110 killer without a chase power, she kind of falls apart. Hag usually gets her wins against solo queue teams that kind of fall apart and get snowballed because they don't look for her traps. That's about it. So Hag going to be finding herself in the D tier there. So Freddy is an interesting one. Freddy is going to be our first A tier killer. And I've always been of the opinion ever since his rework that Freddy has been pretty underexplored in terms of what his skill ceiling is and how strong he is. He requires a deceptively high APM, or actions per minute, to get the most out of his skill form swaps. And yeah, I think if Freddy played at his peak, he's actually pretty strong. He's got good map pressure, he's got good chase pressure, he's got different things he can swap to in chase as long as you are fast enough at throwing those cooldowns out, keeping your fake pallets up, and zoning survivors with them. Freddy's actually got a lot going for him. Up next is Michael Myers, post-dash slop rework, and this guy is actually in the A tier now. I'm actually going to put him just above Freddy. Michael Myers is significantly more difficult to play against now. I have to say, his giving him full turn rate in the camera while using Slaughtering Strike was certainly a choice, as he can munch through pallets and just mow people down in Tier 3 now. Well, it's not called Tier 3 anymore, it's called Evil Incarnate. But yeah, Michael is significantly harder to play against now. He can very easily drain the map of resources as long as he's keeping that stock up and getting to his Tier 3. There are also a few ridiculous builds you can play with him, with Furtive Chase Friends till the end, paired with Judith's Tombstone, which allow him to basically infinitely reset his Tier 3 as long as he keeps getting hooks. So with Michael, he really fares well against mid-tier to lower-tier survivors. There's a lot of complaining going on at the lower end of the MMR with this guy because, I mean, they're used to him being a baby that they can bully, and now he can, like, dash around pallets and stuff. I guess people just aren't ready for that, so he's really not the greatest against really good survivor teams, but your average solo queue games are going to be pretty strong for Michael, I have to say. Doctor is up next, and Doctor is going to be our first C-tier killer. So don't get me wrong, he is a great killer for new players. He's got a lot going for him, and he is not actually easy to play at his peak. There are so many timings going on that you need to precisely hit to down a good player with Doctor, especially when there's connecting loops and pallets involved. So there really is a lot to master with this killer. It seems really simple. Yeah, you just shock somebody and they get locked out of a pallet, but it's actually a lot more than that when you layer that M1 chase on top of that window that the survivors are locked out, how much you can afford to slow yourself down by shocking, etc. So Doctor, C-tier killer, but he's definitely not bad by any means. Great killer to pick up if you're new. Bubba is up next, and Bubba is also going to find himself in the C-tier. I'm actually going to put him right above Doctor because his ceiling for punishment is actually significantly higher than Doctor's. So Bubba is very dangerous. He is probably the most brutal punisher of mistakes in this game, and survivors who find themselves out of position against him are going to die very quickly. However, it's pretty easy for good survivors to just keep their distance from him and run him from pallet to pallet, as it's pretty difficult for him to outplay even filler pallets, honestly, without bumping. Survivors can also force him to break the pallet instead of getting a chainsaw hit. There are some really good Bubbas out there that are kind of putting him up the tier list, but your average Bubba game against really good survivors, I can't put him any higher than C tier. Spirit is up next, and Spirit is going to be another S- tier killer. So Spirit is actually quite strong. She used to be even stronger, but she's received nerfs over the years just to make her more fair and interactive to play against. So Spirit is extremely strong in chase, especially when survivors are injured. Being injured is basically a death sentence against this killer. Where the difficulty comes in for her is getting that first hit on a healthy survivor, because she is a 110 speed M1 killer until she has her power. So landing those phases on healthy survivors is really where the skill comes in for her. Once they're injured, it becomes so much easier. But I mean, if Spirit is hitting her phases, very high skill ceiling, there's really not much stopping her from snowballing. If she's got multiple survivors injured, that phase comes back very quickly. She can quickly ruin a team, up there with the likes of Hillbilly, but not quite as strong as him there. Her mobility and map pressure is significantly worse than the Hillbilly, so that's why she's finding herself a little bit lower there, but still, definitely an S- tier killer. Pig is going to be up next, and this is another C-tier killer here. Going to put her right above Bubba because she actually got a significant buff to her ambush recently, which makes it a serious threat at filler pallets. Not really much else to say about Pig there. She's actually quite dangerous at those smaller pallets now, and even at tiles with the ambush. If you're running the ambush add-ons, her reverse bear traps remain to be one of the best passive slowdown abilities in all of Dead by Daylight. Just getting them on the survivors can be a problem. But yeah, there's a lot going for Pig these days. She's still an M1 killer at the end of the day, so she's going to find herself in the C tier, but towards the top of it at this point. So it's been a good couple years for Pig. Plague is going to be up next here, and Plague is going to find herself near the bottom of the A tier. She's suffering from a lot of bugs right now, but her strength remains unchanged, keeping everybody injured at once and then making a good macro decision to either proxy camp with or slug everyone and snowball with Corrupt Purge. Plague is a killer for the thinking man or woman, very kind of cerebral, where you want to infect, when you take that corrupt pool that you get, especially if the survivors are being stingy about cleansing. One of Plague's most powerful things that she can do against good survivors is to get a hook and then take Corrupt Purge and then proxy camp with Corrupt Purge. Some people might say that that's a scummy way to play, but that is by far the strongest way to leverage Plague's power in all of Dead by Daylight. So Plague she's a pretty brutal mistake punisher, just like Bubba in that regard. When to take Corrupt Purge is everything. She can definitely hold her own as an A tier killer if you are making those perfectly timed decisions on when to go for the red puke and then landing those shots with it. Twins are up next, and Twins are going to be finding themselves in the S- tier as well. And they find themselves there almost entirely because their power is extremely niche and difficult to counter. And they lend themselves to slugging everyone on the ground, which even against good teams, a Twins game is an absolute slog, even with comms. Not every team is equipped to deal with a good Twins player. You have to significantly change the way that you play. The way that you play against Twins is completely different from the way that you play against any other killer. So just by that alone, plus the insane chase power of Victor, there is no looping Victor. Quote-unquote looping Victor is just you praying that he messes up so you can kick him. If the Victor player has their monitor on, you are getting hit. So that's just kind of how Twins is, putting them there in the S- tier. Clown is next, and Clown is actually going to be up here at the top of B tier. The buffs to his yellow bottles recently, as well as the slight nerf to his yellow bottles, still a net buff from before his yellow bottles were buffed the first time though, has landed Clown in a pretty strong spot. He does suffer from the fact that he has no map pressure and no pressure of multiple survivors, but he is insanely strong at tunneling and 1v1 chase. So Clown, pretty good, pretty top of B tier, relatively strong killer to play. You're still going to find yourself hurting against really good teams that are on comms and have strong perks, because he is an M1 killer at the end of the day, but still, pretty decent killer to play, top of B tier. Demogorgon is up next, and he's going to find himself here at the bottom of B tier. Demogorgon, he's not too strong, not too weak. He's got some things he can do. Got a dash, got some map traversal. He's got a little bit of everything, but nothing that he has is necessarily the best in its category. So bottom of B tier for him. He's very well-rounded, but he's not really the master of anything, if that makes sense. Next is the Legion, and they are going to be towards the top of D tier here. Their power does not allow them to down anybody unless they get 5 full hits with it, and since we're assuming that survivors are on comms and competent players, they're never going to group up against the Legion. So you effectively won't have a power, and you'll just be M1 chasing the whole game in our tier list scenario. So Legion is pretty damn good at getting everyone injured, but after that, I mean, it gets pretty hard. Being a killer with no power, Legion players are often seen sacrificing their builder variety to just play Enduring Spirit Fury, and I guess cosplay that they have a chase power, but that leaves them with not much gen regression, and that's going to result in Legion being in the D tier. Nemesis is next, and Nemesis did get a significant buff in the last year or so. So he's going to find himself here in the top of B tier. Pretty decent killer, pretty good anti-loop. exploitable by the best survivors, and also has no mobility. So killers with no mobility or like easy insta-down power are not really going to find themselves anywhere above B tier. So while Nemesis is pretty strong in a 1v1 chase, the fact that he has to walk everywhere and hit survivors 3 times, he's not really going to reach any higher than this. Blight is the undisputed best killer in the game, putting him right above Nurse at number 1. Nurse, like we talked about before, Nurse can be countered by pre-running, dying in the right spots, just keeping your distance from her. Blight has no such counterplay. This guy just gets everything for free. Even though he has to actually play pallets, he doesn't really have to play pallets if you're good enough at him, as the best Blight players can turn literally any tile into an unsafe area with the pallet dropped. So travels across the map in an instant. His mobility power is his damaging chase power. Devs just refuse to nerf his add-ons or his base kit. He's needed it for a very long time. This is the number 1 killer in the game, and I don't think that's going to change anytime soon. Trickster is up next, and Trickster is going to be going here in the B tier, a little bit above Huntress. While he has no mobility like most of the killers in the B tier, he's actually extremely lethal up close, and if your aim is good enough, this is actually a killer that can take down some really good survivor teams. He does suffer from a little bit of map dependence, and he's very bad at tiles that have very tall walls that don't have any holes in them, or anywhere for him to shoot over or through with his knives, but he's still a very strong killer in chase and rewards a lot of good aim and practice. Deathslinger is next. It looks like we're on a streak of ranged killers here, and Slinger is going to be going up here at the top of B tier. 4.4, no mobility, but one of the strongest 1v1 chase powers in the game, as with that gun. And yeah, I mean, he's pretty good for sure, but at the longer ranges of his harpoon, survivors are going to be pretty darn good at dodging left or right away from it, because it is not a hit scan, it is a projectile, so it takes some time to get there. Survivors can kind of flick left or right with their A and D keys and make it very hard for him to hit anything at range. So while he does have a really high skill ceiling for that 1v1 chase, the fact that good survivors can still dodge him with relative ease, and he's 4.4 with no mobility power, he's not really going to be going any higher than the B tier. Oni is next, and this is going to be an A tier killer for sure. It's true that he has to start the game as an M1, but once that blood starts flowing, there's really no game that he can't come back in without with a perfect power. Even if he's at 1 gen left with 0 hooks, as long as he has that blood fury, the game is not over yet. That's kind of where Oni's strength lies, as well as snowballing with multiple survivors injured. He can end up in that empowered state for basically the rest of the game. So there is a lot of room for really good survivors to just bully him in that M1 chase and make sure that he never actually gets to his power. But once that blood starts flowing, this killer just really takes off, and he's going to be at the top of the A tier. Pyramid Head, or the Executioner, is next, and this is another A tier killer here. He's going to be right below the Oni. Extremely powerful M1 chase. And while that does sound a little bit similar to Deathslinger, Pyramid Head enjoys the fact that he is 4.6 and has the special ability to completely ignore any perks that interact with hooks. Some of Survivor's strongest perks available to them interact with hooks, so being able to turn off Decisive Strike, Deliverance, Babysitter, Shoulder the Burden, anything like that is Pyramid Head's greatest strength. So combine that with a really strong 1v1 chase power, the ability to strike through multiple survivors with a collateral, and then just combine that with the ability to turn off the strongest category of survivor perks, and you have an A tier killer. He's about as strong as a killer can be while still needing to walk everywhere and not having mobility power. Artist is next, one of my personal mains, and she is going to be up here in the A tier, but not really too high in the A tier. Now, this placement might get me in trouble with a lot of my fellow bird friends, but I do believe she belongs here. Artist has the same sort of theoretically infinite skill ceiling as the Huntress, where if you are anywhere on the map, Artist can technically deal damage to you if the correct conditions are met. Her other strength is in zoning on tiles with her birds, since she can place 3 of them down at once. So Artist, in my opinion, is a really strong amalgamation of a killer that can switch between sniping and zoning at will. If you are good enough to master her. She's very opaque to start playing, probably why she has such a low pick rate, but if you're able to master the playstyle of zoning survivors into birds and then instantly switching to that sniping playstyle when the range that the survivor is at demands it, I think this killer actually has a lot to offer. She can put constant pressure on the map by sending her birds to gens. She's very good at finding people when you don't have a chase, and can be totally lethal up close if you can run survivors into one of your idle crows and get them with that bird hit. She barely is slowed down at all when she gets a hit with one of the crows, so it's a lot of 2-tap potential if you're able to master this killer. Not for the faint of heart though, extremely difficult to pick up, one of the hardest in the game. Sadako, or the Onryo, is next, and she's going to be here in the C tier. It's unfortunate. She's very cool, love her sound design and visual effects and everything, but they had to nerf her because of the condemned playstyle, which you can technically sort of still do, but it's quite map dependent. So Sadako, as an M1 killer with no chase power, she's supposed to be a stealth killer, but she has a loud lullaby that you can hear from like 30 meters away, so much for the stealth. She's going to find herself at the bottom of the C tier. Hopefully they give her a buff. Skull Merchant is next, and Skull Merchant actually was recently upgraded from the D tier to the C tier. They gave her some pretty good base kit buffs, but unfortunately not enough to put her up any higher than this. So she's out of the total trash do not play tier, and the Skull Merchant mains are finally a little bit happy again that there's no more fast vault immunity. That was an absolute tragedy, by the way. Whose idea was that? And now they can go back to rotating their drones with glee. So Skull Merchant, unique killer. There's a lot to learn about her. As an M1 killer, though, she does have a ceiling that she is kind of stuck at, especially with no mobility power. But if you like highly technical killers that are kind of, I guess, esoteric knowledge, Skull Merchant might be for you. She's not super strong, but her mains don't usually seem to care about that. Up next is the Knight, and Knight is actually going to be going in the B tier here. I'm actually going to put him above the Huntress. Very underrated killer. Rewards a lot of map and macro knowledge. If you have a really good idea of where survivors are off screen at all times, Knight is going to be a killer that you would love to play. He's got his rotating posse of 3 dudes, the Jailer, the Assassin, and the Carnifex, and they all do different things. Of course, if you can constantly be rotating the Assassin and the Jailer on survivors to pressure them, this guy is actually quite strong and can hold his own against good teams. Now, granted, you have to be playing extremely well to beat really good survivor teams with this killer, but it is possible. This killer actually enjoys some love and competitive from some of the best players in the world, which you really wouldn't think with how much survivors complain about him and call him a ChatGPT killer. But I'm a big Knight lover. His aesthetic is sick. Is his power my favorite? Not really, but there's a lot of potential there with the correct macro knowledge. Dredge is up next, and this is kind of a weird one to place. Dredge is he's a very interesting killer. There's a lot of disagreement online about where he fits on the tier list, and for me, I'm going to be placing him at the very bottom of B tier. There's a lot of things that he can do to kind of confuse survivors, but doesn't really work on the best survivors. Nightfall is really thematically awesome, but it kind of loses its fear factor once you have more than 10 hours in the game. and it's mostly only used for the buffs that it gives to Dredge himself. So he's an M1 killer. He's got some really cool secondary effects, but his supposed chase power, the Remnant, he just doesn't move fast enough while he's holding it out to stop survivors from holding W away from him and making it to the next loop. So the Remnant is only really a consistent means of downs if the survivor is either zoned edge map or closed off in a room on, let's say, the Midwich Elementary School. So Dredge, really high mobility. He's got some really nice text that he can do, really rewards good map knowledge, and rewards good gen macro. And so the reason why he's actually in the B tier and not the C tier here is because of the Dredge 3-gen Gambit strategy that has been kind of popularized by one of my Twitter friends, Void Terror. Essentially, you take Sloppy, you take Dying Light and Pop, and then one other perk that is debatable with Malthinker's Skull to get more constant nightfall and injured survivors. And you, at the beginning of the game, you select which lockers you think have the best gens next to them for defense, or which gens have the best lockers for defense next to them, and you just only care about those the entire game. You're constantly popping around the map, going out of those lockers onto the gens, and eventually, of course, only those gens are going to be left, but what are the survivors going to do when you're teleporting around on a 3-second cooldown, coming out right next to the gens, spreading injuries with Sloppy? It eventually will lead to a snowball at one gen left. So, really interesting strategy, and it's actually quite strong and has seen a little bit of win streak play from the Dredge. So it's going to land him right at the bottom of B tier. I know most killer streamers put him in C or even D. So that should say something about this 3-gen Gambit strategy. I think there's really something to it. Mastermind, aka Albert Wesker, is next, and he is going to be here in the B tier. Very fun, very strong, he's very fun, he's moderately strong. Rewards skilled play a lot, has counterplay on both sides. There's a lot to him, he's very satisfying to play, but at the end of the day, he has been so popular over the years that survivors just know what they're doing against him a lot more, and that puts him down a little bit. He's also severely injured by indoor maps, which is also hurting him a little bit, so B tier, I think, is a pretty good place for him. Up next is going to be Chucky, and Chucky actually is very strong these days. 4.4, but he's very tiny and has stealth plus a dash. His chase is extremely strong. I think he's been underrated for a long time since his nerfs. So many people that used to play Chucky just straight up dropped him like a discarded toy when he got nerfed, pun intended. But I think his death was greatly exaggerated. This is a pretty strong killer. He's got a lot packed into that kit, and he's pretty difficult to play against for survivors. So A tier for Chucky. Unknown is our next killer here, and this one is near and dear to my heart. But unfortunately, he is going to be pretty far down here in the B tier. I'll put him right here below the Trickster. Unknown, you're basically fighting against the power the whole time that you're playing him. He's very frustrating to play. With the amount of time that it takes survivors to remove the weakened status and the cooldown of the UVX, you have a window of about 3 seconds to shoot and actually deal damage. Now factor that in with survivors being able to dodge the lingering hitbox of the UVX very easily. The fact that they can break line of sight and make it almost impossible for you to hit your UVX in that window. Let's see, what else? They can just run directly into you because Unknown can't actually look at the ground for some reason. Yeah, so this guy has basically everything going against him. He's got the slowest projectile in the game. It's the easiest thing to dodge ever. Survivors love him just because it's piss easy to dodge his UVX. He's basically entirely carried by his art design and aesthetics and voice, which are sick, by the way. But yeah, Unknown, one of the most frustrating and stressful killers to play in all of Dead by Daylight. Really needs some sort of buff to make him feel better against good survivors. So B tier it is for him. He's got a pretty high ceiling, If you hit every single UVX ever, this is a really good killer, but that's just never going to happen. He's also got the teleport on top of that, which is just good map pressure. But yeah, unknown mid to low B tier just because of how inconsistent his power feels. Singularity is up next, and this is another S- killer if you play him in the correct way, which is the macro gen defense strategy. So Singularity, he's constantly working to kind of win that battle against the EMP boxes. If he can get enough people gooped often enough so that the EMPs run out, that's a form of passive slowdown that either forces the survivors back onto the EMP boxes, or he just teleports on them and starts to kill them. So Singularity finds it very easy to lock down gen setups. He can be anywhere on the map at once if you have the macro knowledge to place the correct pods, play Five Nights at Freddy's and guess where survivors are at any given time, get tags on them, and spread injuries. So yeah, Singularity, he's got a lot going on. Extremely strong gen lock killer, probably the strongest 3-gen killer we have in the game right now. So S- tier for him. Houndmaster is next, and she's going to go right here at the top of the B tier. Some of her bugs have been fixed recently. She's got a pretty strong chase power that is very difficult to use well, and it's extremely punishing to miss too. So she can't really go into the A tier just because of how punishing it is to miss her chase power and how difficult it is to actually hit against good survivors. Also, the fact that she can't really deal with small filler pallets with her dog. The Houndmaster pallet standoff is an absolute classic. So, pretty good killer. She's got a little bit of everything, but she's very hard to pick up and pretty easy to dodge for survivors. Dungeons and Dragons Vecna here is next, and this is actually an A tier killer these days. He's quite good. He's got mobility, he's got ways to find survivors, he's got 2 lethal chase powers, he's got a little bit of everything. He's got very good add-ons. He's definitely a knowledge check for survivors, and a lot of people these days are failing it. I guess, what is that, like roll for knowledge or something? I don't play Dungeons and Dragons, but Vecna is definitely gotten a glow up after the buffs to his cooldowns, so he's really not affected by sprint burst because he's got that flight. Yeah, Mage Hand plus Flight of the Damned, it's a pretty lethal combo. So Dungeons and Dragons Vecna looking pretty darn good there in the A tier. Dracula is next, and this is actually going to be our 4th strongest killer in the game, up there with the Hillbilly and the Spirit. Dracula, he's got it all. He's got the Hellfire in the vampire form, got the Wolf Pounce in the wolf form, and the mobility with the sound detection in the bat form. So really, there's so much you can do with this killer. He's quite complicated and difficult to play, but if you master all 3 of those powers and switch between those forms, you can go Hellfire into Wolf Pounce into Hellfire, into bat form, block a window. This killer is extremely lethal. When you switch forms, the ability of that form is already off cooldown, so you can get some insane 2-taps by going like Hellfire hit, bat form, wolf form hit, and stuff like that. So really, really strong killer. You don't see him a lot though, just because his skill floor is quite high. Xenomorph is next, and this is going to be another B tier killer. I'm going to put the Xenomorph right around the unknown here. Pretty lethal up close in chase, does have some pretty strong add-ons to go with that crawler mode as well, but Xenomorph is very vulnerable to getting pre-ran, and survivors on comms are just going to stack double turrets all over the map. And I mean, seeing a double turret on Xenomorph just means that you lose your power if you go there. There's nothing you can do about it unless there's something that you can like line of sight around to hit them both without getting burned out. But yeah, Xenomorph, pretty decent chase power, but highly vulnerable to survivor counterplay and competent survivors keeping distance. Kaneki Ken, or the Ghoul, is up next, and this killer here is going to be our number 5. right below Dracula, because he still, at the end of the day, does have to down you with an M1. However, there's so much that you can do with this killer, mobility tips and kind of techs that you can do, going for the cutoffs. The vault is still extremely lethal. Good survivors are starting to wisen up to the fact that you can vault back behind him if you get the timing right. But at the end of the day, this is a killer that can fly across the map in seconds and spread injuries. He doesn't down with that mobility power. That's why he's not up there with the Blight. So Kaneki still at the end of the day has to down you in an M1 chase. So he really rewards that M1 chase skill and macro play to take advantage of that high mobility. Amazing killer with Ruin and Infectious Fright, since he can be all over the map. But yeah, really good killer, just not up there with the likes of Dracula and Hillbilly because his power doesn't down. Springtrap, or the animatronic, is up next, and I'm going to put Springtrap right here just above the Unknown. These are very similar killers that have a ranged power that is extremely difficult to hit, has a very high ceiling for flashy plays, but those flashy plays are almost never going to work out. Springtrap has pretty decent mobility, pretty decent chase power. He's got some decent things going for him. He's very middle of the road. He's not too strong, not too weak, a lot like the Demogorgon in that regard. But good survivors are very efficient at pre-running this guy, making sure that they're dodging that axe, forcing him to go for low percentage chance shots, and they're not really getting surprised by his stealth anymore either. So Springtrap finding himself in the lower B tier, a balanced yet not too strong killer. The Kasu is next, and although she was extremely overpowered on her release, she really isn't so anymore. So Kasu is going to be here at the bottom of the A tier. There's a lot of wasted design space in her kit. I'm still not sure why the Leech 2 mechanic exists, because survivors are wanting to cleanse that infection instantly upon getting infected, or the killer leaving them, or getting hooked. So it's a really strange killer design. A lot of people don't play her anymore because, frankly, her gameplay loop is very boring. You infect somebody, you switch to head. You infect somebody, you switch to head. You infect somebody, you switch to head. There's not really any other way to play her. Projectile has auto-aim, so you don't really feel like you're doing anything cool a lot of the time when you're infecting people. And the head form is basically just a Demogorgon lunge that can curve a little with a vault slapped on for some strange reason. I'm not really the biggest fan of this killer. If you play her really efficiently, she can be relatively strong, and that's why she's up there in the A tier. But after her nerfs, there are a lot of kind of filler tiles that she really can't use her head mode lunge on anymore. And last but not least, Henry, Vecna 2, Stranger Things guy. Where do we place him on the tier list here? I think at the end of the day, he's going to be going right about here, with the Oni above Chucky, below the Oni. I think this is an A tier killer for sure. He's got some of the highest snowball potential in the entire game in his World Breaker mode. I'm surprised it took them this long to make another rage mode killer like Oni, but here we have it. World Breaker mode on the first is pretty devastating if he hits his shots. If he hits his shots being the important phrase here, because good survivors are very, very good already at dodging his vine attacks that come out of the ground, pre-running, sprint burst, breaking line of sight, breaking away from a tile when he thinks you're still playing it. All of these things are extremely strong at countering this killer. And if you can deny him those first few World Breaker tokens just by juking him, this guy is going to have a really, really bad time. So he's very vulnerable to survivors being good at juking, but if he is hitting those shots, there's not really any other killer that can end a game as quickly as this one if a Vecna is hitting all of his shots, besides maybe like a Hillbilly getting 4 chainsaws in a row. So This is a killer with a really strong and fun skill ceiling, lots of snowball potential, but also tons of counterplay for the survivors. I think he's very fun to play against. It really has a bullet hell type mechanic when you're playing against him in that World Breaker mode. So yeah, I think just due to his extreme output for damage, like if you see multiple survivors near you in World Breaker mode, you hit all your shots, you can down them both in 4 attacks. And the cooldown and slowdown on those is really not much. So yeah, this killer, like I've been saying, really, really high potential ceiling, but still has counterplay. So I'm going to be placing him towards the top of A tier here. Does not get to join the ranks of the S tier killers just yet, because I know that survivors are going to get better at playing against him. But yeah, that is my tier list, guys. Thank you for watching. If you have any disagreements or emotional outbursts or things you want to call me in the comments, or, you know, polite questions, please do ask. This was pretty fun to make, so thank you for watching, and I will see you guys next time.